Last week, I shared 14 things we learned buying a house in Puerto Rico. This week, I'm going to share 7 more things that other people learned buying property in Puerto Rico. So let's get to it. Buying property in Puerto Rico is definitely different than buying it on the mainland. If you missed my last week's video on this topic, I'll link it here. So here we go. 7 more gotchas when it comes to buying real estate in Puerto Rico. Number 1, you need to understand Puerto Rico's inheritance laws before purchasing property. Now, I'm not an attorney, so I'm going to rely heavily on my notes for this one. Puerto Rico uses a system of forced heirs, which means that descendants of the deceased are guaranteed some part of the inheritance. Under the law, 1/3 of the inheritance is equally split between the forced heirs. Another third is doled out according to the wishes of the deceased, but this too also goes to the heirs. It's simply up to the deceased to determine whether or not they're equal. The last third is available to be given to whoever the deceased wishes. Now this is important. Upon the death of a spouse, the surviving spouse is not considered a forced heir. He or she is not entitled to any one of the forced heir thirds. They are only possibly entitled to the third third. If there are no forced heirs, then the surviving spouse would be the one who inherits. But if you have children, grandchildren, other descendants, that all goes away and the inheritance goes to them. Whether or not the owner is a native Puerto Rican, a foreigner, a mainlander from the United States, these laws, they are governed in Puerto Rico. Whatever will and trust that you had created in the United States, mainland, or any other part of the world does not matter here. The laws of real estate are determined in Puerto Rico, and so these laws apply, which is why you want to speak to an attorney. 2, notary fees are required by law in Puerto Rico, both at loan origination and loan retirement, and they can add up. So Puerto Rico loves notarized documents, and notaries play an important part in the transaction versus in the United States. Notaries are always attorneys. In real estate transactions, there are statutorily mandated fees that must be paid both at loan origination and loan retirement. And these fees range from 0.5% to 1% of the purchase price. So you want to find an attorney that will charge you more toward the 0.5% end of the spectrum. I've been told that the seller customarily pays this fee, so be sure to put that the seller pays the fee in the contract. And if the seller has a mortgage, he's also going to have to pay 0.5 to 1% to retire his mortgage as well. One title search is not enough. Multiple people told me that it's critical to do 2 title searches, one during the transaction and one a couple of weeks after closing, to make sure that it's properly recorded. At the registry department in Puerto Rico, which is the Registro de la Propiedad. And always ask for evidence, which is the Minuta de Presentación. Someone with 15 years experience in the title industry told me that they've seen cases of where person X is selling the house, and when they do the title search, person X turns out not to be the owner. Apparently, fake sellers fraudulently selling homes is fairly common on the island. A title search is also important because it reveals any prior defects on the title, like if something was not properly notarized or recorded, or if there was a change and it wasn't properly taken care of. Your deed will never get recorded unless it is corrected and properly presented to the title registry. Also be aware that multiple and often fighting family members who own a piece of the house can be difficult. They all have to be in agreement to actually sell. And also, everyone needs to show up at the closing table, so be sure to have your lawyer put in writing that it can be rescheduled, closing can be rescheduled due to unforeseen circumstances like weather or some other factor. Obviously check for any liens against the property. Another person told me about a transaction they were in where the seller owed $8,000 to the CRIM due to that agencies, they're the collection agency, due to that agent's faulty accounting, and they had not been able to actually even pay this $8,000. So they credited the buyer with the $8,000, and a year later the CRIM came knocking on the door of the buyer for this tax, which was now the buyer's problem because it's attached to the property. Unfortunately, because they'd worked it out with the seller, they had the $8,000 and they paid it, and all was well. So look for liens and nip these problems in the bud so that you're not surprised later on. Number 4, consider putting your deposit in escrow with your attorney. Multiple people suggested that this is a good idea, and although we put ours with a trusted local broker who'd been in business for a bunch of years and that worked out, many people shared with me that they had heard horror stories and some had experienced, putting their deposit with a less than scrupulous person who basically took off with it. And what these people will do is that even if you have every valid reason to back out of the contract, they will just stop returning phone calls and basically ghost you, and then you have to lawyer up to go get it, and that's expensive. So buyer beware, put your deposit with a trusted attorney. Number 5, home inspections can be very superficial here. So although we had a good experience, other people I talked to pretty much have the feeling that the home inspectors were just basically handymen who just kind of went around, looked at stuff, and gave it sort of a superficial once-over and didn't do the kind of digging that you might be used to in the States. So they suggested that if you really want to be sure what's going on with the house, you want to hire specialists to go in and take a look. So yes, you can have the general overall handyman go in and look, but also have a plumber, an electrician, and a structural engineer go in there, and anybody else who's a specialist to look at things that you might be concerned about. That is the safest way to go. Number 6, beware the homeowner association issues. Here's a few things to think about on this topic. Most condo buildings have inadequate parking, and some have absolutely no parking at all. So you want to check into this before buying. I had a guy tell me a story of him buying a condo, and it came with 2 parking spaces, and he checked with the HOA before purchasing to make sure that yes, this is true, it came with the 2 spaces. He checked everybody, it all checked out, and he closed on the property. Well, almost immediately afterwards, the HOA challenged his ownership of these 2 spaces. It got nasty pretty quickly, and he had to get very aggressive with lawyers to defend the spaces. And his lesson learned was, believe nothing anyone says, and what matters is what's on the deed, and be prepared to lawyer up to defend what's on the deed if necessary. Condos are the best way to live on the beach, but the way homeowner associations run there is a lot like the Puerto Rican government, which, putting it nicely, is not very well. The boards are often controlled by a small number of people who collude and vote each other in and out. One guy who served on an HOA board actually witnessed a rigged election. This mysterious stack of write-in ballots appeared and basically won the election, I guess, the way it was intended to go. Selective enforcement of the rules can also be a problem. Certain people in the building can do whatever they want, while other people get harassed for every little thing. His experience was that HOA board members tend to help their friends, the people they like, and they make life miserable for the people they don't like. Selective enforcement of collections is also a problem with the same criteria. People they like, they don't worry about so much. People they don't like get harassed for every little thing. Another problem is bank-owned properties in the building. Bank-owned units in buildings can be a real problem because the banks don't pay the HOA fees. They're required to pay insurance, but they're not required to pay the HOA fees, and so those get let go. So your HOA may be running with a huge deficit, like over $100,000 or more, and they're trying to make do on less. Puerto Rico is filled with these penthouse apartments on top of these old buildings, which are really tempting to get at an amazing price to buy and fix up. However, if the building looks bad or rough on the outside, it's often the sign of a dysfunctional, ineffective HOA on the inside. So you're not going to be likely able to fix this, and it's best to stay away. Another thing to look out for is some of these penthouses are bank owned, and they've been bank owned for years. And what happens is they start leaking into the units beneath them, and the banks don't care. They don't fix it, and so now the HOA and the units beneath them are saddled with these repair bills. So if you're buying underneath a penthouse, you want to know that there's somebody up there taking care of it. Now, that said, there may be some high-end buildings buildings that don't have these problems. Essentially, when you're looking at buying a condo, you want to look carefully at that building. You can look at the budget and it's all in order and it looks properly run, then you're probably safe to buy there. This gentleman did see one case, however, where a bunch of people went in and bought a bunch of units. They ended up taking over the HOA and they cleaned up the building and the entire building benefited. So if you can do that, then go for it. But otherwise, look very carefully at that HOA before you purchase property in Puerto Rico, because you're going to be stuck with it for a very long time. Number 7, you can buy homeowners insurance in Puerto Rico, but don't expect them to actually pay out if there's some kind of issue. I'm not going to name names here, but we bought a very robust insurance policy, and it's been almost 2.5 years since Hurricane Maria, and we have still not received any payment on our claim. It is unbelievable how unresponsive the insurance companies here are in Puerto Rico. At least that's been my experience, and that's been the experience of a lot of other people as well. That's all I'm going to say about it. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions, please put them in the comments. If you've had a different experience buying in Puerto Rico or run into some additional gotchas, I'd love to hear about them down below, because we can all help each other out. And thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.